Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your interest in my new novel, Scorpionfish. I'm so sorry we can't actually meet in person. As both a writer and a reader, I really appreciate all you're doing for us in these uncertain times. Before I tell you a little bit about the book, though, I just wanted to say I'm really grateful to indie booksellers in general for many things, and particularly for the way they've helped shaped me as a writer. When I was in my 20s after college, I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, and both my brother and my boyfriend, now husband, were managing an indie bookstore there. I was working in a lab on campus and began a PhD program in science, but my heart wasn't into it. I secretly wanted to be a writer, but I hadn't yet admitted that to myself. But I spent all my free time in that bookstore, browsing, reading, attending author readings, and that's when I began to think, could I do this too? So, though I'm not from Athens, my father is. He came to the States in his early 20s, but I've spent a lot of time in Athens, particularly in my adult years, after I turned 18 and could travel on my own. My first book was set there, but it was a historical novel set during the military dictatorship between 67 and 74. But I wanted this novel, although my imagination still stayed in Athens and stays there, I wanted this to be a novel about a contemporary moment. When I began writing this book, I was spending a semester teaching for a semester at sea, a floating university with 600 students, 40 faculty, and 100 staff members. In some of the longer stretches from port to port, I fell in love with and was deeply calmed by being in the middle of the sea's vastness, which also felt a bit eerie too. One beautiful afternoon, I was out on my room's balcony and saw the ship's captain standing on the mast outside the control room, up high, just looking out at the sea. There was such a peacefulness to it, and I began to imagine the voice of a captain and what it might feel like to stop, for whatever reason, a life at sea. Except, instead of the Pacific, I imagined the Aegean, not a particularly fraught passage, one of holidays and long weekends, unless, of course, you're crossing as a migrant or a refugee. I've spent a lot of time in Athens, and in one particular apartment, my balcony overlooked a beautiful, lively courtyard, and I was taken with both the publicness and privateness of the space. You heard people's arguments, their phone conversations, couples making love, people talking loudly on Skype, children playing, people talking in hushed voices. One woman in particular who lived across the courtyard from me would always point silently to the balcony above her, trying to ask me what was going on there. And I really loved this space, the blurred boundary between what was public and what was private. And I began to imagine two characters there, what conversations might unfold, both for an audience of one and whoever else might be listening. And those characters were, in the end, Mira and the captain. At the opening of the novel, Mira arrives in Athens for the first time since her parents' death months before. Her neighbor, a ship captain, has recently been suspended from his post. And the two of them start having these long conversations on their adjoining balconies. They can't see one another, though. They're just both looking over the courtyard. Their lives are connected by their friendship with Natalie, a well-known artist who came of age during the military dictatorship. And Mira and Natalie have been friends since Mira was a child. Natalie is about 25 years her senior. And to Mira, Natalie is everything, a best friend, a mentor, a mother, a sister. And though sometimes Natalie exasperates her and vice versa, Mira really sees her as a way of making your own path in the world. And I think Scorpionfish is about defying more traditional ways of being in the world outside, say, socially sanctioned structures. And I was thinking about the link between loneliness and vulnerability, too, and the way these things can cause boundaries between people, and also allow us to cross those boundaries or blur them. And in the context of this current moment, this alone together moment that we've been talking about, both narrators are newly alone in various ways, and it's through their conversations that they find connection. Even though this novel wasn't written during this moment, I'm thinking about it now in the context of this moment. They're also sitting on their respective balconies, which are, of course, both public and private, and they're talking to each other. They're talking to each other, but it doesn't mean they don't have a larger collective audience too, people who can overhear them. I was thinking about a line I read from Elena Ferrante, who said that something like stories are written from the balcony of the present, looking out at the electrical storm of the past. And though I read this after I was deeply into the writing of the book, it really stayed with me. Mira and the captain are telling their stories from this so-called balcony of the present, literally. And I'm interested in the stories we tell about ourselves and the stories we tell about other people, and also who has a right to tell these stories, and how does our involvement in the actual telling change the story itself. Recently, I read an essay in LitHub by the writer Andre Osserman, and it was called "Who Will We Be This Time Next Year?" about the COVID crisis. And he says of Europe, people are singing from their balconies, a show of hardy solidarity and fortitude. And then he qualifies it in a way that feels far more true. He says, actually, they are wailing. And I loved this so much. I love the way he recognizes the link between mourning and a greater collective of being seen. And there's something about the balcony in particular that feels suited to grief, to lament, a sort of in-between space, the idea of moving through something. And though this novel is about grief, it's true, I hope it's also about beauty and joy, and the link between beauty and joy and despair. I think what connects all these characters, not only the ones I've mentioned here, but the other characters as well, is their deep capacity for both sadness and for joy. And I don't think we can really fully experience one without the awareness of the other. And I think in many ways the book is about that. Thank you all for watching and listening, and I hope you're all finding some solace in literature the way I am, and may you all be well. Thanks a lot.